Hey guys, welcome back to RetroActive, where our console wars happen in 2 dimensions. I am Joey, your host, and my esteemed partner and co-host.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah.
He's talking about me.
Talking about Will.
Yeah, that's my name. If I sound a little weird, it's because I'm a little sick still. I was sick all this weekend, and that's also why the podcast is probably showing up a day late. So sorry about that, guys.
Happy Tuesday, everyone.
Happy Tuesday.
Hopefully.
Here on this delayed retroactive. But
What do we got for us today?
Well,
Will.
there's some news that originally the news came out I think it was over a week ago, but we wanted to actually sit down and talk about Nintendo this week. Nintendo announced their global release date for their new system that everybody had been, kind of already anticipating them to announce, which they're currently calling the NX, which
I think they called that the Wii U, the NX originally.
Yeah, well,
it's just the Nintendo next generation.
The new thing.
That's just the nickname from now on.
Yeah.
For any systems that they will have coming out.
Oh, see, I like the really cool old names like the Dolphin,
the Revolution.
The Revolution. That was what the Wii was supposed to be, right? The Revolution.
But unlike the Wii, when they actually had a physical copy of the console to show off at E3 when they still call it the Revolution.
Yep. We
got the name for the end. Okay, first of all, they don't even have a name for this.
Yeah. They just called it the NX
everybody
else did.
The news came out the other week basically just through a single tweet.
Yeah.
And it was after some sort of shareholder meeting or some
it was a
business
financial review.
Yeah.
That's where they got this information
and
from.
so there was no fanfare or anything, just a tweet saying the release time frame.
Yep.
And they also called it the NX, which is weird because I thought that's what fans called it.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
I thought that was a name that the press made up for it.
Yeah. But there's no images, no official name, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that we now know that Zelda, the new Legend of Zelda, is going to be on that system as well as the Wii U.
Which, guess what, everybody? That also means that the new Legend of Zelda, which was originally slated for a 2015 release, is now delayed to the new NX release date, which is going to be March of 2017.
Surprise, they're delaying Zelda.
So almost a year later.
We didn't anticipate this already.
Yeah, but I guess it's kind of like what they did with Twilight Princess, sort of, when it came out. Although no, Twilight Princess released on the GameCube first, and then it came out on the Wii.
No, it was the same time.
Okay, so it's kind of the same thing, but
it is exactly the same thing.
Yeah. So,
and just like how Twilight Princess kind of signaled the death of the GameCube, this I feel is probably going to do the exact same thing to the Wii U.
Yeah, well, they
as sad as that is, because it's such a system.
Yeah, I know you like the system. I know
it's
you like
a great system.
You were trying to. So Joe, back when, especially when Splatoon came out, Joey was
trying to solicit as much
it.
people as I could into the Wii U. Family.
All of our friends. He was trying to sell us on the Wii U, and I mean, some of us have it. I think Johnny has it, and Jared,
I think you're the only one that doesn't.
Am I the only one that doesn't?
Yes.
Does Leslie have it?
Yes.
Brandon have it?
Well, they have a Wii U.
Oh, well, shit. Well, I guess me and Josh are the only people that don't have a Wii U.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It just didn't really do enough to sell it to me. There's not enough games that I feel like that I would really want.
Plenty of games. Hey, we're not going to get into debate about how many games or how many good games there are.
True.
All I can say is that I'm pretty bummed at the fact that the Wii U is now on its way out.
Yeah, they already announced that. I think they're only anticipating about 800,000 more units being moved between now and
zero
next year.
big Nintendo titles being released for the rest of the year.
Part of the financial review was they were showing a release date of the games coming out for not only the Wii U but the 3DS, and there's no first party games really in the pipeline other than I think they're working on a new Paper Mario.
I forgot about
Pokemon
that.
Sun and Moon is coming out this holiday season, which we haven't really seen much of yet, but they're supposed to do a Nintendo Direct for it sometime in the next month or so. And Metroid Federation Force, which that was the game that fans were actually calling for Nintendo to cancel because it looked so terrible. It is a really bad looking game that looks like it has nothing to do with Metroid outside of the name. But that'll be a topic for maybe another time when it actually comes out and stuff. But yeah.
Let's just lament the passing of the Wii U right now.
Yeah.
Because I will say, the third-party support was pretty much non-existent.
Oh, yeah.
But it's with the Wii U, it's all about the Nintendo titles, and I feel like that's just the same thing with every other Nintendo console. It's, you pretty much buy it just for the
Mario,
Nintendo games,
for Zelda, for Pokemon,
Splatoon, which I will say, like, I'm gonna go on record and say that's probably like my game of the generation. Like, it did more for the shooter genre than probably any first-person shooter did in the last like 10 years.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Mario Kart 8 is like the pinnacle of kart racing games, and it actually showed that Nintendo knew what to do with online.
Yeah,
like, they didn't go with the stupid friend code only bullshit, and now you can actually play like in a huge ass room with 12 people. Yeah, it's fun.
But see, that's always been the problem with Nintendo, is that it's kind of like they're coming out with this stuff a little bit behind everybody.
Too late,
you know? It's a little too late, you know. And I mean, the thing that I noticed about the whole idea of the Wii U is that it had a relatively short lifespan. So if you were to say that, like, okay, next year is going to be, you know, the year that it's done, right? That's like a life of like 4 years, I think, which is incredibly short.
Little over 4, yeah.
Yeah, that's incredibly short for a console. I mean, you look at, you know, the last couple of consoles that have come and gone, like the PS3 and the 360, 9 years. Even the Wii, the original Wii, 7 years. PS2 had a lifespan of 13 years before they finally stopped making them, because it was the best-selling system
making the system itself, or the games? Because I remember they continued to make like FIFA like 14 up until
but no, I mean, specifically the consoles. Like the console, like it had a 13-year lifespan of just the console. You could go out and buy like a brand new like PS2 that was made, you know, in 2013 or whatever. And even the GameCube like had a 6-year lifespan, which was still more than the Wii U is going to have, which is kind of like sad. It's actually really depressing to see you know. I mean, and for me, like Nintendo's always been a touchy subject, because like basically after the N64, I kind of lost a lot of faith in Nintendo, and I wasn't really, you know, I didn't buy a GameCube. I received it as a gift, and of course I didn't buy a Wii, and I hadn't had like a Game Boy since like the original Game Boy Color. But, you know, it's my concern is that Nintendo's continuing this weird cycle of like decay, you know, and decline, and, you know, and I'm kind of like feeling that it's we've seen this before with the way that Sega went all, you know, back in the days, and how they kind of had this weird sort of decline where they were forced to stop doing hardware, and in order to exist as a company, they had to like just make games for other systems. I don't think Nintendo's going to go that way. And also, I think it would be a real shame if they had to like change their model of business and away from like hardware in particular. But yeah, it's kind of a concern of mine as somebody who, you know, who does like Nintendo and their games and everything. I mean, what do you think, Joey? Because you're a huge fan, I know, of Nintendo, and especially the Wii U.
Yeah, I think, you know, as much as I love Nintendo and the consoles, and despite buying them without really a second thought. It's they all have a very, very strange, like, I guess, presence in the market. Okay, so let's kind of take a look back at like each one of the consoles real quick.
Right.
So we know that as a whole, Nintendo is they're known for making pretty much, I think, almost exclusively like games only systems.
Definitely.
Like they're very strict with that. Like they don't have like a single system that can play CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays, or even have like a video player in the system, like to plug in your flash drive or anything. They don't have any of that.
Yeah, it wasn't until the Wii even that you could like put applications on it like Netflix or anything like that, right?
Yeah, and even then it took a while, but like out of the box, none of their systems can like play games. When the N64 was released, people were getting on their case for not going and switching to discs. Yeah, I remember that.
Definitely.
And people were like, oh, the PS1 is going to be so much better because you can have all these bigger games with multiple discs, and it's a lot cheaper to produce. And then look at what happens when they do finally switch to discs. You get these little tiny ones for the GameCube
like the GameCube
are proprietary, and then you can't put like a regular CD in there anymore. Yeah. So they're trying to do it. They're trying to like to keep up with the market, but do it in their own way.
Yeah, they're not trying to do like what Sony and Microsoft are doing and trying to sell you a complete entertainment system. Like, oh, this is something that's going to be the focal point of your living room. It can play games, but it can also like watch Blu-rays, and you could watch Netflix and go like, you know, download like HBO Go or NFL Network or something on it.
Like for the PS2, that's probably why it lasted for so long.
Oh,
because
yeah.
when it first came out, it was
the cheapest DVD player you
yeah,
could buy,
it was
too.
the cheapest DVD player. Like,
Yeah.
this is, oh man, this is back in the
That's
time
why-
when
yeah.
DVD players were coveted.
Yeah, that's
and
why my
having-
mom like had no problem with me buying one in high school.
Yeah.
She was like, "Oh, now we can buy DVDs." You know?
It's insane. Like,
Yeah.
we know that Nintendo didn't do that. They didn't kind of cater to the multimedia aspect
Right.
of the systems, and that could be one of the reasons for their so-called failure, like especially in this console generation. But like I kind of get where they're coming from,
Right.
because with Nintendo having such a long history of creating consoles, I feel like in their minds, creating just the same one over and over, just with updated graphics or whatever, it gets boring to them.
Yeah, it's like I feel like with every console generation, they're I feel like their aesthetic to designing the games changes too with the hardware. You know, like they're always looking to develop like games in a different way, but still have them retain a lot of the elements from those original series. Like, I mean, with Zelda and everything, I feel like every Zelda game on the new platforms is always kind of like different in a lot of ways. You know, it has a much different design aspect than before.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just make another Zelda game that like looks the exact same as, you know, the last generation. They're not trying to remake Ocarina of Time over and over, even though
They've only done it once.
I mean, I guess technically it was on the GameCube too, with that disc, that bonus disc that you have.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
But
like I'm not speaking about the game specifically, more
Right.
about the actual hardware. Because as you see each one change, like especially after the N64, they decided to go like completely like not quite different route, but just it's just weird, I think. I don't know. Oh man, I can't really describe it right now.
it is weird. I mean, for me, as somebody who didn't follow them a lot after the GameCube 2, it always just felt like with the hardware, it's like I really disliked the Wii originally and the 3DS because of what I felt were gimmicks, you know? And like motion controls. I've always thought motion controls would have been a real gimmick, and I've always thought like 3D was always a gimmick too. Like not only in games but in movies. I've always been very much against that. I mean, call me, you know, you could say I'm stuck in the past with that, or I'm a traditionalist when it comes to that, but I really don't like.
That's the point of this show, to be stuck in the past.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, it's like I just don't want to like stand up in the middle of my living room and be waving my hands around just to play.
First
a
of
game.
all, with the Wii, you don't have to do that. The Kinect, maybe.
That's the
yeah.
Kinect, yeah.
But as you can see, with the Kinect actually existing, it's
Right.
it's a sign that says, hey, the stuff that Nintendo was working on like 4 or 5 years prior to that, it's significant.
Right, it is.
And I feel like people kind of give Nintendo a lot of flack for trying those kinds of things. And even though
Yeah.
they might not work for them originally, it sets the bar for what people will actually like buy and what people will actually get into.
Yeah.
And it opens the door for all this, like, all the changes to happen with other companies like Sony and Microsoft.
Yeah, and it totally did, because you look at what happened after the Wii was released, like Sony came up with their own thing, and then Microsoft came up with their own thing, and it was just such a horrible failure because, you know, they didn't really take the time to really develop games for it with that aspect in mind. It was just always sort of an afterthought, and they're just like, all right, let's just have some other crappy third-party people make like a party game for it or something. There you go, that's fine.
See, I think like in my opinion, it's been like a really long and bizarre road for Nintendo, like kind of going this way with their consoles. And it seems like they just keep digging themselves a hole. And they've been doing that for like the last 15 years.
Right.
But as the Simpsons have taught us, we can always still dig up. Right?
That we can do.
And so for my hope for the NX is that they kind of return to their roots and, like, ironically enough, focus more about the games as opposed to, you know, how they're played.
Well,
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
back to how it used to be.
how it used to be.
You know, all
Come
in
with us.
the retro times.
Back in time. We're going to pull you back into the past now to talk about... Whoa. Yeah, let's look back at some of the greatness of Nintendo. What are we going to start with, though?
I don't know. What are we going to start with, Will?
Well, I figured that because you didn't really own an NES growing up, right?
No.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and talk about what came after that. We're going to talk about the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, mainly because that's also my favorite Nintendo console of all time. I mean,
All time,
yes. And the reason for that is because, it had such an amazing library. That is you want to talk about, like, your hopes for the NX being the games. Super Nintendo, to me, had actually, like, one of the best complete libraries of all times in terms of games, Games that were, like, really full of innovation, really full of creativity, and most importantly, they were really full of heart and soul. They were games that, like, really were designed with a lot of care and attention to detail. All that good stuff that dreams are made of, And I think that's why a lot of really good indie games today, they have that same kind of retro or old school look and feel. Harkens back to a time when games were simpler in terms of style, but they made up for it in, like, other aspects, like having really good gameplay and tight controls, having a really great story, having an awesome soundtrack, And I mean, also I like the Super Nintendo because part of like what Nintendo, part of the thing about Nintendo these days is that they don't really cater a lot to third party, or, like, I guess third party companies don't really develop a lot of software for the current Nintendo systems. But the Super Nintendo, that was back when, like, not only were Nintendo's first party games really good and some of their best ones, but they had a ton of really good third party support too. They had companies like Capcom and Squaresoft and other companies making, like, really great games. And some of those games were actually, you could argue are the best games that were designed by those companies at that time, So, Super Nintendo.
Do you want to know why I like the Super Nintendo?
Why do you like the Super Nintendo, Joey?
Because it's cool.
I'm
done.
Short and sweet. You don't have to sell it anymore. I think I did a good enough job of that. Well, why don't we start off with you then?
No, I'm going to start off with you.
You want me to start off?
You go start off.
All right. Well, we're going to limit it to 3, our top 3 games of the Super Nintendo generation. So, my first one, if anybody out there already kind of knows me, then you should, like, this should be no surprise. My favorite game of the Super Nintendo era has to be Chrono Trigger.
Shocker.
Yeah, not shocking at all. Chrono Trigger. It was a RPG designed by Squaresoft at the time, and I'm not going to tell the story about.
Yeah, everyone knows what Chrono Trigger is. Why do you like it?
Exactly. I mean, for me, that was, like, probably the first RPG I ever played. The first RPG, mainly because a friend of mine at school, actually, he had the player's guide, and he would always, like, draw, like, he was a really good artist, so he would always draw the pictures from it, and I always just thought the design aspect was really cool. And I later came to realize that's because, Akira Toriyama, the guy who made Dragon Ball, designed all the characters and all the visual effects and everything. But yeah, I mean, I love RPGs because of that game. And to me, it still stands up as being one of the best RPG experiences of all times out of every generation. Because everything about it is done so well. It's got, like, really great, like, sprites and graphics, considering it's a Super Nintendo game. The graphics really stand up even nowadays. The soundtrack is just so, like, great too. It's so timeless. And I mean, everything about the gameplay too is really good too. The battle system is nice and fast paced. It's not one of those RPGs you have to spend, like, hundreds of hours grinding. It's a game you could really finish in probably, like, 10 to 12 hours if you're very quick about it, Something you probably like because you don't like those kind of long grindy games. And to me, the best part about it is the story. The story is so good. It's probably some of Squaresoft's best, like, storytelling out of any game that they've ever done. Even now, like, we take for granted now that, like, a lot of Square's games, like their RPGs, like the Final Fantasy
so
series,
anime now.
Yeah, it's very anime. It's very pretty. The graphics are super nice and slick. But oftentimes, like, the story doesn't feel quite as complete. It just
gets convoluted with drama and a lot of stuff that they try to infuse, like, oh, maybe we can have whatever, him fall in love with this guy, and then
yeah,
keep it simple, like Chrono Trigger.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's simple.
It was a good simple story about time travel and saving the world.
God, okay, you can't say that's a simple story about time travel.
Okay, it might not have been incredibly simple, but when you play through the game and you see the story, it feels simple enough. You're not gonna like. Your imagination is not going to be stretched so thin that you're going to be like, oh, what is going on in this game? I don't even know anymore.
Fair enough.
So yes, Chrono Trigger, #1 game of the Super Nintendo era, possibly of all time. I think it still is.
So, if you want to hear more about this game, click the link below to listen to our Gushers episode.
Yes, we actually did an episode of Gushers on this for our YouTube channel, Sick Aya. So if you want to find out more about why I like it, going into more detail and depth and everything, go click the link there. If you're watching on YouTube,
I'm sure it's somewhere.
We'll probably put a link on our Libsyn page too, or something if we can.
Or is it my turn?
It is your turn, Joey.
Okay. So first of all, I'm just gonna say that you're a jerk for making me pick my favorite. It's like making me pick 3 of my favorite children.
You're welcome. Because everything needs to be ranked.
So instead of picking my 3 favorites, I'm gonna do a little bit different. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick three games that I think help broaden the appeal of the system more than any other ones, because I think that's especially what the NX kind of needs to do. You know, they can't just keep releasing games like Splatoon, even though how it's really, really good, it still has a very, very small appeal.
Right.
Just because, for reasons. But yeah, just 3 games that help make the Super Nintendo a system seller, in my opinion.
All right.
Something I hope the NX will eventually do. And so the first one, I will say, this is already easy, but Super Mario World.
Surprise!
Oh yeah. Because the best game of the system wasn't a system seller. Okay.
It came with the system in most cases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was a system seller because it was sold with the system. But I think, in my opinion, the Super Mario World is probably the apex of Mario platformers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything in the NES era was kind of leading up to this. All the secrets in those, just all the gameplay, it just kind of culminated into this, little big bang of a Mario, like Mario's head in space, and just goes and Super Mario World, the box art shows up. But yeah, like the sheer number of levels in this game is probably like that was enough to keep people content.
Oh yeah,
but
it was amazing.
They decided to go the extra mile and include like all the bonus worlds and all the secrets, and you really don't see that anymore today. Like everything in games nowadays is usually known like 3 months beforehand. We know what specials we'll get. We know what DLC we'll get.
Yeah.
We'll know like the codes and secrets and everything.
I was going to say, because a lot of times like now it's like those kind of secret worlds would be DLC.
Exactly. But in Mario World, the Star Road and the Special Zone are probably some of the greatest secret levels and like the most well hidden ones to ever be put in a game. Because like not only does it feel satisfying to even find the entrances to all levels in the first place, there's actually a point to completing them. Like they're not just something that's tacked on to the side. You go to it, you're like, oh, okay, that's fun, and then you continue your main quest.
Right.
Like the bonus worlds, they link the spots in the entire map, and you can use those levels to complete the game in like 10 minutes if you want.
Yeah, because you can go like I think right to Bowser's castle too.
Yeah,
right to the boss battle if you finish it, right?
Yeah, it's like one level before.
Right.
And I will do Chrono Trigger 1 better with this because I think Super Mario World, they did New Game Plus before New Game Plus was ever actually a thing. Because if you beat the game with all 96 stars or all 96 levels, you unlock the special mode where all the Koopas turn into Mario heads.
Wow.
You don't remember that?
I don't really remember that.
Holy shit.
I think.
Oh, man.
Yeah, see, I'm thinking back to that now because our friend Gordon and we actually spent like quite a lot of time back in the days trying to complete the whole game. And I think we did, but I don't think we ever really played like the New Game Plus mode. So
yeah, like
that's new to me.
After how when you start the game, it shows you how many levels you completed.
Right.
And if you beat all 96, there will be a little star next to the number.
Okay.
And you start the game, and you go into it, everything is brown.
What?
And so it changes the entire game. It starts you off on the first level, and then everything is different. Everything has Mario heads. Like, they look really, really creepy.
Well, now I have an excuse to go back and play this game again.
How is that not like the craziest, like most awesome secret in a Mario game?
Mm-hmm.
Are
you actually asking me, or
no?
Okay, I don't have an answer.
Rhetorical question, but at the time, I don't think there was any other game that was as ambitious and expansive as it was, and just plain good.
Yeah,
Mario.
And definitely the jump there from like Mario 3 to Mario World. It's a pretty big jump too. There's just like so much more to it.
It feels bigger.
Yeah,
not just because it is.
Yeah,
yeah. That's my number 1.
Well, I'm just going to kind of piggyback on that because my number 2 game was going to be Super Mario World and Super Mario All-Stars, which is like actually one cartridge, if you can believe it or not.
Yeah.
So basically, for me, the classic argument was always, what's better, Mario 3 or Mario World?
That's an argument?
Don't answer that, because that's supposed to be a rhetorical question, goddammit. But that's the nice thing about...
I got your answer right here.
That was the nice thing about the Mario World and All-Stars cartridge, is that with the cartridge, you can have both in a single game.
But it's not a game. It's just now 2 games.
Well, yeah, but still, you can have both.
That's like asking, do you want a milkshake or a milkshake with fries or a burger?
What? Well, what if you're not that hungry?
But you get it anyway. It's the same price.
But yeah, but
that's not fair for the milkshake.
See, if you only ever had if you were like Joey and you started with like a Super Nintendo, for example, and you never had an NES, how are you going to go back and play Mario 3? Your parents are not going to go buy you an NES, just to play that like an old game. It's like, oh, it's old, we don't need to buy another system. This way you can have both alongside all those other slightly less good Mario games, but they're still good, but slightly less better. They're less better than Mario World and All-Stars. And what's cool about it too is that they actually went back and they upgraded all the graphics too for all the original Mario games. So
they look weird.
They do look weird, but I mean, if you look at the difference between Mario 2 and on the Super Nintendo and on the NES, it looks a lot better. It actually has a background. Things have depth. The colors are so much nicer and
it's
clearer.
It's just like this weird like a middle ground between the NES and the Super Nintendo. Like it doesn't quite look as good as Mario World. For some reason.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just leaves me uncomfortable when I look at it.
Yeah, I think they tried to keep the aesthetic mostly the same, but just kind of like, a little more colorful and less like blocky looking. But for me, it actually, it still looks really nice. I feel like it looks a lot better. And what's even more important is I feel like they actually improve the controls a little bit. And I mean, don't get me wrong, because like all of the original Mario games still had a pretty solid control, except for maybe Mario 2, which had this weird floaty feeling.
Yeah.
But when they translated it to the Super Nintendo, they actually upgraded it a little bit. They kind of gave it Mario World's feel a little bit, so everything just felt so tight and so much better, And I mean, all of these games, they defined side-scrolling platforming games in like, the 8-bit era too. So it's nice to actually like have them alongside, their older, I guess their younger, better looking, taller brother, in the one cartridge too. I mean, that was one of those cartridges I can kick myself for not buying it, because I would probably still be spending quite a lot of time playing it now. And it's just so great to have everything there, because I love Mario 3. That's still probably my favorite. I think I still have a lot more fun playing Mario 3 than Mario World. Don't ask me why, just because, that was my childhood. But yeah, Mario World, Mario All-Stars would definitely be like my number one, my number 2 game on this list. If I had to pick.
You get your milkshake and your burger. Fine.
Yeah.
Fine with just my milkshake. My number 2. So like I was saying, we're going with, or at least I'm going with more of a like significant games to help sell the system. And what better way to sell the system than with Street Fighter 2?
Yes.
Woo! As everyone knows, it was a fighting game that really just made it good.
Yeah.
Because Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 1 was terrible.
Right.
But Street Fighter 2, everyone knows that's the one that everyone played.
Yeah.
And as an arcade game, like there was that question of whether or not you could really replicate the experience of the arcade in the console. Like, would it be that faithful to it?
Yeah.
And I think it was, going back and playing the arcade version, like over, like in arcades, like again, it's perfect. I think the SNES version is like literally perfect. Like it has no technical flaws in it, and it's as true to the arcade version as it can be.
Yeah,
and
I don't think there's ever been like there's ever been an arcade to console port that's been exactly like that.
Well, Marvel 2 is probably like a really good example of that. But this was one of the first ones to actually try that, at least. Like when it came out for the SNES first, and at the time, it was like, 1992?
Yeah.
The Genesis could not play it.
Right.
That was one of the things that, like, they just couldn't do, because even, if the hardware could, power it, they only had 3 buttons.
Yeah,
you couldn't play it.
Yeah. That's
like,
true.
And eventually, when it did come out for like the Mega Drive, you could say that maybe that version was the best because of the hardware. But like the SNES version was probably just more significant, and it's showing that it showed that you can have an arcade perfect game on a home console. Like not even Turtles in Time was perfect when they brought it to
Yeah, they had to make some changes to it.
All said, maybe the home version is probably better than the arcade one, but it was still different.
Mm-hmm.
And like it was a game that I feel like it single-handedly kind of ended the discussion, or it really brought it, maybe even more arguments, but like it ended the discussion about the console wars between the Super NES and the Genesis for the time being. Like the discussion of whether or not the Super Nintendo is better than the Genesis will always end with, well, can I play Street Fighter? And they were like, I'm calling my mom.
Yeah, that's not even to say too what Street Fighter 2 just did for the genre itself, like of fighting games, which is like, I don't know.
What did they even have before Street Fighter 2?
I can't even say.
Like what predates Street Fighter 2?
Yeah, like that would be a question that we'd have to look up and research, obviously. And
who wants to do that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, we don't have the time for that, but yeah, Street Fighter 2. Fun fact, that was actually my first fighting game, and also...
Fun fact, that's like... that's everyone's first fighting
game.
Yeah,
it probably was.
Also was Mortal Kombat. Ooh, Mortal Kombat, actually. That's when the Genesis did better.
It did, yeah. I remember playing Mortal Kombat mainly on the Genesis, never really on the Super Nintendo.
You could turn off the blood.
Why would you want to do that? It was funny, too, with Street Fighter 2. Actually, my dad bought me that as a gift one time, but he bought it mainly because he wanted to play it. So he's like, he bought it for me, and then he's like, oh, let's play Street Fighter. And then, of course, once I started whooping his ass on it, he stopped wanting to play it after that, because my dad's a very sore loser when it comes to those kind of games. All right.
Yeah.
So that's your number 2.
Number 2.
All right. Well,
continue this. Keep it rolling, Will.
See, my number 3, I was trying to...
Was it Street Fighter Turbo Edition?
No, it was not, actually. But it was Street Fighter, was definitely one of my honorable mentions. But I tried to think of games I tried to think of games, first of all, that are not all RPGs, because I already said Chrono Trigger. And, because obviously I love the RPGs from that era. I also tried to think of like games that, were not all first-party games, because like I said, the Super Nintendo had a lot of really great third-party games too.
Yeah.
And one that I remember loving so much on the Super Nintendo was the one you just said not that long ago, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time.
Ooh.
Yeah. Because, at the time, too, like the Super Nintendo and arcades, too, like I used to go to the arcades all the time, they had a ton of great, like, side-scroll beat-em-up games. I mean, you could, like, go down the list of all the quote-unquote classics, like The Simpsons, and Final Fight, Streets of Rage, Alien vs. Predator, X-Men, all of those ones, and it's like, but the Turtles ones, for some reason, were by far my favorite. I think because I loved like Ninja Turtles as a franchise growing up too. I watched the cartoons. I had all the toys and everything. Yeah, and I spent a lot of time in the arcades playing the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. So when I saw that they had like Turtles in Time for the Super Nintendo, I was all over that. And I think that at the time that was when my mom didn't really like to spend a lot of money on games because we weren't really that well off. So we would go to Blockbuster every Friday, and she would let me rent a game every Friday. So I think Turtles in Time, that was like one of those games that I rented probably every other week. Like,
so you spend more money renting it than you would have.
I mean, maybe not. I wouldn't say more money, but I probably spent.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, we probably spent enough money at Blockbuster on that game alone to warrant just buying it, And I never did, but because my mom loved to play that with me too. So that was a game that like Street Fighter with my dad, Turtles in Time was like a game that my mom and I actually bonded over a lot, and we played a lot on the Super Nintendo. So that was also part of it too. Is like that was another part of it too. Just playing a game with my mom and enjoying like a game with her, and something where we're not like playing against each other, but rather like we're both beating up on the Foot Clan and Shredder and all the bosses. And what was good about it too is like it was challenging, but not in like a quarter muncher kind of way that a lot of the other arcade ones were like,
Yeah.
You didn't have to sit there and like constantly like continue and constantly like constantly like keep mashing on the start button to come back. It didn't feel unfair at any point. It felt like if you were good enough to beat the game by yourself, that you could do it. Unlike something like X-Men, or like I was playing Golden Axe recently just for the heck of it on the from the Sega systems, and that's one of those games where it's like no matter how how good you seem to be at it, it always finds a way to like kill you.
Yeah,
and make you put another quarter in.
Something in the middle of the screen just gonna explode and kill. But
yeah,
you bring up an interesting point with the quarter munching aspect of a lot of the games, like especially for beat 'em ups.
Yeah,
what I think was interesting with Turtles in Time is that even though it is an arcade game, or it's at least based off an arcade game,
yeah,
the amount of content that it actually has in there is not limited to like the amount of deaths that you have.
Yeah.
I guess a better way to put it is that it doesn't try to hide behind the fact that it doesn't have a lot to offer by constantly killing you over and over again.
Yeah.
Something like this is a different example, but I'll say like Gauntlet, where there's like a timer that's literally just ticking down until you die. Or
it's also known as your life bar.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm saying like, it just constantly, it's not your life bar because it just keeps going down even if you don't get hit by anything. And that's like a way to keep you from experiencing like content that they might not have put as much effort into because it's like stuff being behind a paywall almost.
Right. And it also preserves a lot of the length. Like I remember when X-Men came out, they got re-released onto like the PlayStation Network. Mm-hmm. We all went to like Johnny's house and we all played it like with as many controllers as we could possibly like connect to the system, man. We, and of course in the console version, you don't have to worry about quarters and stuff. You just keep pressing start and to continue. Mm-hmm. That game took us like 20 minutes to beat because it's so short.
Turtles in Time is about 25 minutes.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, I feel like there's so much more to it, It doesn't ever feel like you're stuck on one boss who just keeps killing you unfairly.
Right.
It's a matter of like, yeah, you can rush through it because, you've beaten it so many times, you already know where everything is.
Yeah.
So that's part of the fun of it, is like just seeing how fast you can beat it.
Yeah, like there's, at the very least, I think there's like a little bit of skill involved in that game.
Oh, yeah. Because there's always just score challenges.
Yeah, well, not just a score, but just being able to dash and like shoulder bump them and then throw them immediately.
Yeah, exactly. Seeing how many you could throw in a row.
What I always like to do with the guys that were made of rocks? Just push them or throw them to the edge of the screen and just keep hitting them because they won't dash off screen. So you just stay at the edge and just keep whacking them
until you hear them explode.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Turtles in Time, like for me, that's also one of the biggest examples of like something that's classic and timeless too. I mean, it's still a very, very much like considered one of the better Super Nintendo games of that time, especially one of the best third-party games. That was made for the system. You wouldn't really, for me at least, I don't really think of Turtles in Time as being like specifically like an arcade game. I think of it as being on the Super Nintendo, and I that's where I remember it most fondly, is being on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, that's my number 3.
Wow.
For sure.
Wow.
What about you, Joey?
Okay.
Round out
my number 3. I'm going to round out my number 3 with a game that I'm sure plenty of people know is Donkey Kong Country.
What?
2.
What game?
Donkey Kong Country 2. Diddy's Conquest.
Oh, Diddy's Conquest. Oh, I get that.
A pun that I did not get until I was about 20.
It's okay. I didn't get it until you just said it out loud.
Because I always read the title as Diddy Kong's Quest.
Yeah.
So I didn't think anything of it.
Like, right. It's like he's going on a quest. He's going on an adventure.
Yeah. But it's his Kong Quest.
Right.
So yeah, it's the second one, not the original. And not the terrible third game that we played through.
Oh, yes, the one where I basically just died and let you do all the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I picked 2 for just a couple of reasons. That one, it's probably the most focused out of all the games. Mm-hmm. It has out of all of them, it probably has the clearest theming, if that kind of makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense, yeah.
Because if you take a look at the first game, it's super solid. But it kind of jumps all over the place. It's just kind of generic jungle, factory, stone. It doesn't really have too much of a personality. And I can forgive it because it was, the first of its kind.
Yeah.
But when 2 came around, they decided to go like this very, very specific like piratey theme. And they do it so well. Everything from the music is just super consistent, and the feel of the levels just feels like, yes, I get that this is like a pirate, world.
Right. Yeah, that was made by Rare too, wasn't
Rare.
it? Yeah, some of Rare's like earlier work too.
I think that they were known as Rareware.
Rareware.
Back then.
Yeah. Another good example of like, a third party games that were
they're second party.
Second party? Well, were they third party back then, or were they still owned by Nintendo?
Ooh, good question. We should probably look that up later on when we're not doing a podcast.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's like 2 was probably the best game, even though I didn't actually finish it.
Oh.
It's the only one I didn't actually complete all the way through.
Oh.
But that tells you how good it is, because it's like...
Because you never beat it?
Because
So that must mean Ocarina of Time is like the best game
You see
ever.
why people like it so much?
Because
I never finished it. But it did everything like a good sequel should do.
Uh-huh.
Like it kept everything, mostly everything intact, like as far as the gameplay went. But it built up all the levels and added so many different like new elements into the level design.
Yeah.
That it was incredible.
Yeah, and like you said, it was a lot more of a focus game too in terms of thematics. I think they had a lot to build on too. Like after they made that first Donkey Kong Country, it's like, okay, well, let's continue with this theme, and let's like improve upon it. Yeah, I guess much in the same way that like Super Mario World did all that from jumping off of Mario 3. Too.
Yeah, you can see why I picked these games.
Yeah, I do.
Whew.
Damn, so much good stuff on the Super Nintendo.
I know. We still haven't gotten to so many other games.
I know.
Like Monopoly.
Oh,
and Scooby-Doo Mysteries.
Oh, all the games we
and
played.
Clue.
Clue, yeah.
No, not those games. But like the actual, real good games like Mega Man X.
Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of honorable mentions. That was the thing when trying to come up with this list.
Well, let's go through them and let's give them a cheer.
All right.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well,
said for you to go through them.
Well, some of the ones that I had, like I said, I love RPGs. There were a lot of RPGs that I would have loved to throw on this list, but one that I put for the honorable mentions was Secret of Evermore. Not Secret of Mana, or Mana, depending on how you pronounce it, but Secret of Evermore. It was the only game that Square ever developed in the United States, back when they actually had a development studio here in the U.S. Yeah, and... it was a really underrated game. It basically took a lot of the elements of Secret of Mana, but they kind of set it in this weird world that combined like elements of different periods, like the prehistoric era, or like the Egyptian era, or like the Greek era and stuff like that. And you would jump between all those, and it had a really cool like system. Like it had a really cool action RPG system too, where you'd level up and like you'd get all these different weapons, but you also had alchemy, so you'd basically find ingredients all over the world, and once you would learn spells, you could combine those ingredients into like the spells, and it was really fun to play. And they didn't actually add like the multiplayer to it, because normally it's a 2-player game. Yeah. But because you're a boy and his dog, but they didn't really add like that to the actual the final version. But if you go download like the hack of it, you can actually play like a 2-player version, and it's super fun. It's super fun playing with 2 people.
Woo! That was my fanfare.
There you go. Do you have any honorable mentions you would like?
I'm sure I'll think of one as you are going through yours. Right. I haven't written them down yet.
Well, one that I think we can both agree on, Mega Man X. That was
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know that?
I've never played it. That's why it's so good though, right?
Well, the funny thing is, I feel like that's pretty much the only like actual Mega Man game that I've played and beaten, other than like Mega Man Legends. Like Mega Man Legends, I think was like one of the first Mega Man game I ever beat, and it's not even a real Mega Man game. It's more of like an action RPG hybrid kind of game. But Mega Man X is probably one of the best Mega Man games I think I've ever seen. It's just so like, it was so complete. And it was so different, and like Egoraptor, he has this whole like sequelitis episode on it that also lays out why it's so good. Mm-hmm. Just in like, it doesn't have to tell you everything. It basically, like, that whole first level is such a great intro into the game, and it controls very well. It looks really cool, and it's set in this awesome, like, futuristic world full of like cool killer robots and machines and everything. And unlike a lot of the earlier Mega Man games, it never really felt unfair. Like, I feel like a lot of times with those old Mega Man games, sometimes they make it really challenging, but in a way that makes it kind of feel slightly unfair. Whereas Mega Man X, it just felt like if you fucked up, it's your fault. Like I didn't time this right.
Yeah, so the boss didn't do something cheap this time. He just you screwed up. You didn't jump fast enough or something like that.
Or you didn't memorize the pattern or something like that. And it had a lot of really cool secrets for you to find too, which was awesome. I always appreciate like collectibles, and I always appreciate like secrets and stuff like that in old games. So the fact that you could find all the tanks and all the upgrades, the armor upgrades, that was super fun. Mega Man X.
All right, I thought of one.
Okay, go.
I'm gonna go with Goof Troop.
Goof Troop.
Because I you mentioned the 2-player aspect of Secret of Evermore.
Yep.
I picked Goof Troop because it is one of the only games that are for the Super Nintendo that is a 2-player co-op game.
Yes.
Like surprisingly, there aren't that many of them.
Yeah, there's really not.
Like you have all the beat 'em ups, but it's slightly different. This is like a strict like adventure game.
Yep.
Like pretty much like Zelda, but it's 2 players.
Yeah, and a lot of the puzzles too, and a lot of the game's design is designed around using 2 people too, which was super interesting.
Like you could use 1 player to just take you like a hell of a lot longer.
Yeah.
Like the way that the enemies are laid out and the way that levels are designed, it's meant to be like if you like there are some screens that have enemies like laid out around with a perimeter, like a what do you call it, like a fence,
right?
And you clearly need like someone with a bell to ring it so that you can attract them here and then go around to the other side and
with
then
the other person to do all that stuff. Yeah. I remember, because oh man, I think that was one of the more fun times I had playing the Super Nintendo too, is when we were all at your place, a couple of years ago, and me and our friend Marty played through the entire game in like one sitting, and I wouldn't even call it a sitting because we were standing up the whole time playing it on your old TV.
I don't remember you guys standing up.
Yeah, we were standing up and playing that game
or something.
It was so fun though. We beat that whole game because it was just so fun. And it was one of those games where, it was just really cool to like figure out a puzzle together.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel like I feel like even in contemporary games, they haven't figured out a way to do games like that. That
like
are
puzzle games specifically.
I mean, any kind of games I'm sure there are really good examples. Like I think Portal 2 has a really good a really good co-op multiplayer that is all about solving puzzles together. Mm-hmm. But I even think about like Nintendo's most recent attempt to try to make a game like that with Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes. It's a game that's designed around puzzles and using 3 players.
Yeah.
You can only ever play with 1 person and have 2 AI partners, or you could play with all 3 people. You can never play with just 2.
So they're kind of in the same sense as Goof Troop.
Yeah.
Like you need like another, like, okay, you don't need another person,
but it would take you a long time to beat that game.
And it's 10 times more fun with another person, which I think is kind of funny that you're using that. What's it called again? Triforce Heroes? Triforce Heroes as a comparison for Goof Troop.
Right.
When Goof Troop kind of use like Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past as like its base.
It's got that aesthetic to it. Yeah, like that look and feel to it. But and what's cool about Goof Troop, I thought too, was when I found this out, it was like, it's funny because it was produced by Capcom.
Yeah.
And it was also designed by Shinji Mikami, who went on to create the Resident Evil series. So that's kind of a weird sort of like connection to make, but yeah.
Humble beginnings.
Exactly. It's such a great game, too.
Great game.
Got any more honorable mentions that you thought of?
Ooh, I didn't want to... I was thinking about Killer Instinct at first. I was like, do we have enough fighting games?
Hey,
and it's not really like, for my list, it's not, I wouldn't say Killer Instinct is Instinct. Instinct is as significant
right
to the system as Street Fighter 2 was. But I think it was still really, really good. It was really solid. It kind of showed that Street Fighter 2 wasn't the only fighting game you could have. Like, there were, aside from Mortal Kombat, you could have other companies make games that were solid. It was a kind of a weird fighting system. I guess I came from Street Fighter 2 and had no idea really how to handle it. Yeah. This was back before I really got into fighting games, and I just had it just because it was on the Super Nintendo.
Right.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
It was.
A lot of blood.
I know. I like that too. I rented. That was another game I rented from Blockbuster a couple times, I think, and I had a lot of fun with it too.
Yeah. I would just use Cinder most of the time.
Cinder?
Like, he would just have that. Because he had a very simple move that was just forward, and punch. And he would do that little torpedo thing.
Right.
Yeah, so I would just kind of try it with that.
I mained him also in that game. Him and Folgore.
Mained.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. You call him that main.
Using that fighting game terminology now. Yeah.
But, I mean, they clearly saw it as, like, a valuable IP since they eventually went on to make a new one.
Yeah.
And that one is also very, very good, which is on PC now, so I can actually...
Oh, you can play it now.
I can if I download Windows 10, which I haven't gotten around to.
Yeah. Someday. It's either Windows 10 or Xbox One. Lesser of two evils, I guess. All right, I think we got time for one more honorable mention.
Okay. You got one?
I do, actually, and it probably, it's a game that, like, I really wish they would return to for real, but somehow, like, now that it is officially 20 years old now, I don't think they ever will, and it's Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars.
Nope, never gonna happen.
Yeah, because...
Stop kidding yourself.
Oh, that was such a great game, though. I mean, that was truly a game where it's like, you take a really great Nintendo franchise that everybody loves in Mario. You give it over to a company that has a really great pedigree for making like super awesome RPGs in Squaresoft. And what they poop out of there is goddamn magic. It was such a great RPG with a super cool story, like really great graphics, awesome soundtrack. Sound like a little bit more like Chrono Trigger, like the way I talk about Chrono Trigger, right? Mm-hmm. But it was a super great game, that like, even to this day, it stands as being one of the best RPGs I think of all times too, and it's like Nintendo tried to go back to that series afterwards in creating Paper Mario. That was the influence for Paper Mario in that series, but it just never was the same, it's not the same kind of game. In some ways, I'd be curious to see what would happen if they tried that collaboration again. And tried to take the same aesthetic, but I feel like both companies have...
Just the way that the two companies have gone in the 20 years since.
It would be probably really bad.
This is going to be weird.
It would be super weird.
Can you imagine, like, Final Fantasy 13 style, but with Mario?
Yeah, because Square hasn't made a great RPG in, like, I don't know how many years, and Nintendo, they just don't like to work with them anymore, I feel like, with almost anything.
I know that people just praise Super Mario RPG so much.
Yeah.
Like, I know this, but what I'm wondering is that, do people see it as a Mario game or more of like an RPG, like a Squaresoft game?
I feel like it's mostly an RPG, like a Squaresoft game.
So, like...
It's not like part of the Mario...
It's not part of Mario canon.
Yeah, I feel like it's not.
So I'm just... Like, I never played through it. Once again, that's probably why it's so good. But I always wondered, like, how much Mario influence do you actually get within the game, and how much would it change it if they went to something like a different franchise?
I mean, I feel like there is a lot of influence. They take some obviously creative liberties, like they create a lot of new areas and a lot of new characters, but they try to be really faithful, I think, to the characters that they do put in, like, having Bowser and Toadstool in there as like being part of that world, and having the Mushroom Kingdom finally represented in a very like real way, like a town and a kingdom, is pretty cool to see. And even Star Road, they have Star Road depicted in there as like a place where this is a place where like wishes are granted, so this is where all the wishes go. And the whole idea too is that the setup for the game is that Star Road is broken, and the whole thing about the 7 stars is you're collecting them to restore Star Road. And it's just there's so much great world building that I feel like Nintendo could have used for themselves if they had kept this partnership going, or at the very least they retained all the rights to it, because there are like so many cool areas in the game that Square, I think, obviously just kind of made most of those areas up for the game itself, but they have such a great aesthetic that works for a Mario game, so that there are places that could work in a Mario game developed by Nintendo. So,
but that's not going to happen.
I don't think it is.
Well, I think Paper Mario is a good enough consolation. I think, like, it's solid, but
I'll take your word for it. I never played them.
Really?
Never.
Oh, maybe one of these days when you have a GameCube.
Yeah, which is not going to happen again.
All right. We are running out of time, so let's let's chug on over to our final round.
Final round.
Chugga, 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 chugga. Why don't you start us off, Joey? What you been up to? What you going to do?
Oh, man. If people don't know already, the Overwatch beta was this weekend.
Oh,
that's what I've been doing for like last 3 days or so.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You and the rest of our friends.
Oh my God.
Been playing a lot of Overwatch.
Oh my God. This game is good.
Yeah.
Like it somehow surpassed my expectations of what I thought it was going to be like, and just like when they showed off all the characters, it was really cool to see like how different everyone was, like in screenshots and in videos. But it's way different when you actually play it and you get the feel for them, and like their personality comes out like through how you play them. Oh my God, it's like
nice.
It's just
Instant buy.
Well, it wasn't instant. I just bought it today, or I pre-ordered it today after
okay.
like going through the whole thing. I'm like, I should probably get around to it.
Still,
just click the big buy Overwatch button in the main menu.
Still, that says something nowadays when you actually buy the game before it comes out rather than wait and see. You know?
Well, no. You want to get into an argument about pre-order DLC and how that's the thing? No.
We'll save that for another episode. I'm sure I'd have a lot more to say on that. All right.
But yeah, Overwatch. It's not just a TF2 clone. It's not just another MOBA. It's something different. It's special. Well, that's all I'll say.
All right.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, well, first of all, a couple of shout-outs for this past week and weekend.
Thank you, Will. Thank you.
Not for you, but so I wanted to, so obviously well, not obviously, but obviously it was Mother's Day this past weekend, so happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, including our own.
Thank you for buying us our Super Nintendos.
Exactly. Thank you for buying us all of our consoles, and thank you for being patient with us as kids, because I'm sure we were quite a handful as kids. It was also...
Speak for yourself, man.
Well, I will speak for myself, and I wrote that in the card to my mom. Sorry for being such...
You wrote "speak for yourself."
I wrote sorry for... It's like, thank you for being patient with me all of these years, because I know I'm not the best. I'm not the best kid, because I'm an only child, so I've always been kind of a brat, but that's all right.
Yeah.
It was also my girlfriend Joss's birthday this past week, too. So happy birthday, Jasmine. Hope you like what I got you. I know you like what I got you, because one of the things I got her was StarCraft 2, Legacy of the Void.
Should have gotten her Overwatch.
No. Well, she would have had to wait like another month for that.
But it's a thought that counts.
But no, she was playing that like almost all day yesterday, like Legacy of the Void. Yeah, and I was going back to that too. That's also what I was doing the last couple of days. I reinstalled StarCraft 2 on my new computer, and I picked up on the campaign where I left off, because I never did finish the first one, Wings of Liberty. So I hopped back into that recently. So it's been fun. I actually really want to go back home and play it too. Like I actually got, jumped right back into the story, and it's like super, super good. And I don't know why I never bothered to get around to finish it,
Because it's just a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
Freaking StarCraft.
Yeah, like every mission now is like half an hour long or so. And also, I've been keeping up with the NHL playoffs, so the Sharks hopefully will advance to the next round of the playoffs after tonight. So I hope by the time this episode airs that the Sharks will be in the
They're not going to get reverse 3-0 or whatever.
Well,
I don't even know how you would call that.
Yeah, really. Well, they're up 3-2. So if they win tonight, they move on. If they lose, then we have a Game 7 probably on Wednesday.
Well, let's hope. Go Sharks.
Go Sharks. And
is that it?
That is all. I think that is all the time we have for today. So thanks a lot, guys, for listening into this episode of RetroActive. Once again, I am Will.
I'm Joey.
And we will catch you next time.
Hey guys, as always, thanks so much for listening into this episode of RetroActive. If you enjoyed the podcast and want to hear more, please don't hesitate to subscribe to us on iTunes and YouTube. And while you're at it, hit that like button, if there is one. And leave us a comment to let us know your thoughts. We promise we'll read it. We're also on social media. You can check us out at Facebook under RetroActive Podcast, Instagram as retro.active, or Twitter as _retroactive. Yeah, we really couldn't get the same name on any of those things, but oh well. We'll catch you next week.